Welcome back to the Sporting Eyes show for the 13th of February. Hope everyone's doing well. Today we're going to have a look at one of the AFL's new rules, play a game of Under the Heat, talk about one of Fremantle's young midfield guns, and finish off on how the Sydney Swans reviewed their heavy grand final defeat. But the place we're going to start today's show with is at Melbourne, and if there was a club that needed to spiritually exercise their demons, it is fittingly Melbourne. We know they've had a lot of problems throughout 2024 and maybe even a bit before that. But I do think overall it's been a positive pre-season. The club's been doing a lot of the media. Simon Goodwin, Max Gawn, Jack Viney, Petrarca have been on Channel 9, 7, 10 in print. They've been everywhere. And I think it's part of a plan to assure their fans that they're on the right track. And overall, I do think it's been a positive pre-season. They went for a camp up in Bright. Jack Viney said they had a lot of honest conversations, mainly led by Christian Petrarca at the Bright camp and at the club, who obviously told the team, the players, the executives how he wanted to improve the way they were going about things. And I think from that perspective, with clearing the air, removing Kate Roffey as president, getting rid of a CEO, Gary Pert, and doing the review, they've done that. So I think from that perspective, kind of with the off-field stuff, clearing the air, it has been a positive pre-season. But it's still not all smooth sailing. Simon Goodwin, when he spoke to the Herald Sun, was talking about Clayton Oliver and was pretty adamant that we wouldn't see the best of Oliver, at least in the first half of the season. And I think that's a fair thing to say. Still looks a bit heavy to me. Has he got that power back in his legs? I'm not sure, but if you expect Oliver to be getting 40 touches, kicking goals, and doing what he was doing at his best with his burst from stoppage, I don't think we'll quite see that from him. But if he can still be a clearance bull, get the ball to Petrarca, Trent Rivers, even Ed Langdon's been playing on ball, get it to those guys on the outside, I still think Oliver has a pretty important place in this team. But again, I think, as Simon Goodwin was saying, he's still not at his 100% best, maybe more at 60 to 70% of what we know Oliver can be. And then throw in Kozzy Pickett. It does seem positive that he's invested, but again, texting Fremantle teammates, telling the club at the end of last year that he's homesick. It's a watch on Kozzy Pickett and his investment levels. I believe that he's fully invested, because I don't think Pickett's the type of character to pout or quit, but it is something to keep your eye on. So overall, Melbourne's been bashed up a bit. I've made a lot of videos about them questioning their culture, but I think we do have to give them some credit this pre-season and the off-season that they have cleared the air and are ready to enter this season with a bit of hope. Now, something that has also become clear is the buddy rule. This was reported by Jake Nile from The Age. And essentially, with these long-term contracts, those of 6 years and beyond, AFL club executives, boards, and CEOs now have to tick off on these. Now, I'm going to read the direct quote about this rule that was actually implemented before the 2024 season, which is interesting because we're only hearing about it now. So the board, CEO, and these guys need to take full financial responsibility for meeting all current and future contract obligations, irrespective of any personnel changes in the club management or governance structure. So by forcing clubs essentially to tick off these contracts, they take full responsibility. And the other part of this, the AFL may choose at its sole discretion to impose this requirement of any player contract it deems high risk for any reason. Now, the reason I read that out is that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it? The first part of what I read says that the board and the president, CEO, all the executives need to tick off on contracts, so that's a rule in place. So why would the second part of it require the AFL to then enforce that clubs need to do that when they're already forced to do it? It just doesn't make any sense to me. And this whole kind of hidden buddy rule, obviously based on Lance Franklin leaving Hawthorn to join Sydney on that 10-year contract, doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I don't know who from the AFL or Clubland leaked this, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it? I don't quite get the point of it, because I would have thought, even without this rule forcing clubs to look over long-term contracts, that any general manager or list manager would have already have presented their contracts to the CEO and got them ticked off. So I'm not sure what the whole point of this rule was, what the AFL was trying to achieve with it. Are they just trying to save face a little bit, saying, hey, we make sure the clubs from top to bottom look at their contracts and tick them off? I'm not sure. Personally, I don't have a huge issue with the long-term contracts because I think they can help a club out and give players long-term security. But we know a lot of people don't like it. But again, I'm okay with it. But moving on, we're going to have a look at some of the coaches and in the AFL and see if they are under the heat or not. But we're not going to pick the obvious ones like Beveridge, Longmuir or Nix. We're going to pick some different ones and have a look at that. Time for under the heat. Now I'm going to pick 4 AFL coaches, maybe some you don't suspect, and I'm going to say if they're under the heat or not. And the first one is Adam Yze from Richmond, and I'm going to say he is under the heat. Not from a win-loss or percentage perspective or even a competitive perspective. I think a lot of people expect Richmond to be the worst side this year. I think their win total over and under is 2.5 or something really low. But the reason Yze is under pressure is I think we need to see a game style from him and make it clear with this young crop. I think last year he was seen as being a bit nice, trying to win over a senior group, and I had plenty of sympathy for it. Very hard to inherit a bunch of star premiership players and try to mould them and get along with them. I get that, but he's cleared a lot of them out. They've gotten the draft picks in, so now it's really the first year of him coaching with a clean slate. And we know he's from Melbourne. He's from the Simon Goodwin tree. He was also at Hawthorn. I think what he wanted to implement at Richmond last year was that defensive game plan, solid behind the ball, try and have a good on-ball unit. But going forward, I'm not sure there was that much structure. So I think the pressure on Yze is to make it clear. Is he going to play like the Melbourne side of the 2021 Premiers, where it's defence really solid, that's the number one, strong midfield and the forward line they'll try and figure out? Or is he going to try and play like Richmond did before with a bit more pace, transition, game style? So that's why I've got Yze under the heat, just to make it clear what type of game plan he wants his Richmond team to play. Next, I've got Alistair Clarkson, and I'm going to say he's not under the heat, and this is why. It's really only his second full season as coach. We know the first year he had to take leave because of the racism incidents. At Hawthorn, he had to go through court. It was very taxing on him, had to take a break. So I gave him a pass for that first year. So really, again, it's only his second year. I'm not sure that they have a great list. I know people are saying they have to win 7 or 8 games. I don't see it. They do not have great squad depth. They have one of the limited, if they get injuries in their midfield or forward line, they're in big trouble. In defence, they have okay key position stock. But if you look at North Melbourne's team on paper, it's pretty midfield heavy. Not sure about the pieces on the flanks or the support with Nick Larkey. I don't mind Jack Darling, but he is 32 or 33, and he's now limited in his veteran years. But there is a however with Alistair Clarkson, and 2025 is kind of an important year because it's now 10 years since he won his last grand final, and since 2015 he hasn't done a whole lot of winning in charge of AFL teams, so that's something to keep note on. But for me, I don't think Clarkson is under the heat. And then moving on to Brad Scott, and I'm going to say he's not under the heat as well. I like Essendon's plan, led by their new list manager, Matt Rosa, formerly Gold Coast player. Well, they're going to take 3 years to get some new draftees in. No more getting the Dylan Shields of the world, Will Setterfields, Peter Wrights. They're going for the best talent. So when I did my 4 of the best, I had Essendon going under their win-loss total for the season, getting maybe 6 or 7 wins. So for me, there's not much pressure on Brad Scott. The club's got to keep the course. I think it could be rough the next couple years, but as long as they keep blooding their guys like Ben Hobbs, Durham, Caldwell, and Nate Caddy up forward, and hopefully get some games into Zach Reid, I think they'll be okay. So I think that's important, to play the youth and trust the process. And for me, that's why Brad Scott is not under the heat. And the last coach I'm going to have a look at is Craig McRae from Collingwood, and to me, he's under the heat. and it's partly to do with his own doing. We know they've been aggressive in trade. They got in Dan Houston, Tim Membry is a delisted free agent, and Harry Perryman from GWS. So they've gone all in, but that does leave them limited. Again, they have pretty poor squad depth. Harry Di Matteo, one of their young guns, he's been injured. Not sure about Finlay McRae and some of their depth players. So when you're paying a lot of guys big money and you've got a lot of veterans, older players who are injury prone, that puts pressure on you. Do I think Craig McRae is a great coach? Absolutely. And I think he's done a remarkable job in his 3 seasons, even last year, with at times about a third of their team being a VFL team. Still thought he coached really well to even give them a shot of being in the top 8. But right now, they're pretty healthy. I think De Goey's a bit of a mystery, but they need to manage their team well. And if they can do that, I think Collingwood will be okay. But Craig McRae's under the heat. If they get this wrong, get a lot of injuries, can't get their depth players to play really well and get some growth out of their youth, then that does fall on the senior coach, because we know he's been on radio. He's been pretty clear that he wants players to win now. And what you don't want as a Collingwood fan is to be left in a West Coast situation where you're paying guys a lot of money who drop off in form. You have a lot of guys retire at the same time, and you don't have youth coming in. And we all know what that equals, and that's a lot of big losses, just like West Coast. Moving on, we're going to have a look at one of the Dockers young gun midfielders. He's not so young anymore. His future at the club and the midfield unit of the Fremantle Football Club. Well, a lot of good news if you're a Fremantle fan, and it's all to do with Andrew Brayshaw. So he did a press conference about a week ago and was pretty adamant that he'd be signing on for the football club, hopefully for a long time if you're a Fremantle fan. And he hopes that his management can get the deal done before round 1. So that's really important. It's a great sign that the club's heading in the right direction. He's one of their young leaders, potentially their next captain after Alex Pearce. Maybe Caleb Sarong gets that, but you'd expect Brayshaw to be the next captain of Fremantle. And there was some interest from St Kilda. We know they go after a lot of players, a few other clubs. So to get it done early, out of the way, will be really beneficial for Fremantle. But the greater discussion goes to their on-ball unit, which I think quietly is looking pretty ominous. In 2022, Brayshaw didn't come out of nowhere, but his impact on the competition rose significantly. All-Australian, best and fairest, and he was actually named the AFL PA MVP, so that the players voted for him as the most valuable player of the 2022 season. And it feels like the past couple seasons he's maybe dipped in form a little bit. Sarong's taken over from him, but he actually hasn't. I went through his numbers. So in 2021, he averaged roughly 28 disposals a game. And in the next 3 years, he's gone 29 disposals, 29 disposals, and 29 disposals per game. And in all those years, his clearances and score involvements have been at a really high level and improved. So I think the emergence of Sarong and some of his match-winning performances has actually clouded how good Brayshaw has been, how consistent, and how much he's improved. Now, he did only kick 7 goals last year, and he did kick double figures in the 2 years before that. But if that's the one thing that picked his game, Fremantle, obviously, I don't think will be too bothered about that. And so when you throw in Brayshaw, Caleb Sarong, Matt Johnson, who's 193 centimetres, he played a lot on the wing last year, but I think he can play on ball. Then obviously Hayden Young, Shai Bolton in there, and even Nathan O'Driscoll, again, another one of those wingers who's looking to move inside. That's a great on-ball unit, and it's really really got a high level of energy. And it's pretty impactful when you throw in Young and perhaps Bolton in there, because we know Sarong's the in and under guy. I kind of compare him to Joel Selwood. I think that's his best comparison, where Brayshaw we know is inside and outside, and Hayden Young is probably the best kick out of all their midfielders. So it's a great combination for me. You're probably asking yourself, where's Nathan Fyfe? I'm not sure he even gets in this Fremantle team. I feel like the Dockers have been kind of held captive by him the past couple of seasons. I think it's time to move on. I think Matt Johnson's better than him, and even Neil Erasmus could pass him as the season goes on. So I'm not sure I'd have Fyfe in Fremantle's best team. at all. I'm not even sure you're playing forward. And that young core I just listed there is pretty exceptional. I think it matches it with the other young cores like Port Adelaide. Probably not as explosive as the Powers, but maybe a bit better contested. So I think Fremantle's in a great spot. You get Brayshaw signed before round one. It's another distraction out of the room for Justin Longmuir, who needs to coach well. And with a midfield like that, throw in Darcy, hopefully if he can stay fit, and Jackson. Again, that's a great call for Fremantle that will last, a pretty long time. Now, something else that lasted a really long time, pretty surprising, was Sydney's grand final review. Dean Cox was on AFL.com, said they reviewed the game first day back at pre-season and said, if you can believe it, it took 7.5 hours and that the first minute they spent an hour on. He didn't go into specifics about whether it was player effort, tactical stuff, what they actually looked at. I'm guessing it was probably a combination of all of those things. And I think it's the hardest position a coach can be in, just from experience. Obviously, I'm a Bulldog fan, and in 2021, we were doing well for 3 quarters against Melbourne and collapsed a little bit. Melbourne were just way too good, especially out of the middle. And at the end of 2022, my Bulldogs blew a 40-point lead to Fremantle in the elimination final, and Luke Beveridge essentially revealed we didn't look at the grand final loss of 21. He wanted to essentially ignore it, get over it, and move on to the new season. And that's why it's such a difficult position. If you would completely ignore it, kind of the air of it's still there, it's still on your mind, even subconsciously. But if you review it like Dean Cox has done for 7.5 hours, that can also bring up perhaps some nightmares, a bit of scarring. But on the other hand, it can clear the air and perhaps everyone can breathe and move on. So it's a really difficult decision. I like how honest Dean Cox has been with everyone about it. He hasn't shied away. He's admitted that obviously they got it wrong on the day and they reviewed it first thing first. If I had the option, if I was a coach, I think I would review the grand final. Perhaps not for 7.5 hours. That might be a little too torturous. But again, it's kind of similar with that Melbourne thing. When you speak about things, you get them out in the air. I think you can move on pretty quickly. So I like that Dean Cox has done it, but history does show that grand finalists who get beaten really badly, get humiliated, do often struggle the next season. But perhaps this review could be an important part of moving on and trying to get the wheels turning in 2025 for the Sydney Swans. Thanks for watching the Sporting Eyes show for the 13th of February. Have a great Thursday. The football's coming up soon. It's exciting. And I'll see you guys on Monday.